Mike Brown, the former FEMA director.
Joining us here is the former FEMA director.
History, I think, was very unkind to you, my friend. Very unkind.
Mr. Brown, thanks for being with us.
This is Michael Brown Unplugged.
Hey, welcome to this episode of Michael Brown Unplugged. It's getting close to the anniversary of D-Day. And when I was, how do I describe this? When I was told by iHeart that I would no longer have a show on KOA, of course, you know, what you do is you get your, you have to go get your belongings and put everything in a box and leave the building. And so, of course, I did that. And one of the things that was in my box of goodies was a stack of letters. And there are a stack of letters signed simply every time. I've opened up 1, 2, 3. I've opened up 5 of them. Now, I've opened up several over the course of the years. I have a stack probably a foot high in these small, the small, not the A10 envelopes. What are they called? The A4 envelopes, these smaller envelopes. And they always came addressed to me, Mike Brown. These are obviously in care of 630 KHAL Radio, 4695 South Monaco, Denver, Colorado. And they're postmarked Denver, but there was never a return address. And for the longest time, every time they would come, the first one I opened, obviously, because I was curious what it was. And then I would open them on a regular basis. And then I have to confess, and I actually feel very, very guilty about this. It got to where I opened them less often because the letters were almost always essentially the same. But because I don't have permission to give out the individual's name, and I've been trying to search to see whether or not this veteran is still alive, so that I can, now that I've got some time on my hands, to see if I can track down this gentleman and maybe take him to dinner. But he always signed the letters sincerely, like this one is, sincerely a lucky survivor. Or this one, sincerely a lucky American. Sincerely a survivor. Sincerely a survivor. And at the top, in the top right-hand corner of the letters, he had always written his name, and under his name, WW Roman numeral 2 vet. World War II vet. And so, yes, I do feel guilty that over the course of years and years on radio, I slowly kept reading fewer and fewer of the letters as they would come in. And I am now digging through them. And I thought I would share just a couple of them with you. I don't think all World War II vets are like this. But this is a man who served our country. There's one letter where I know he was a paratrooper because he mentioned being a paratrooper. So I know that at least in World War II, I'm assuming because he also talks about the Allies, that he must have served in Europe. So here's one letter that I thought I would just share with you. This is a random letter. I have 5 of them in front of me. But I want you to think about the pain and the frustration in this letter. Mike Brown, freedom, ? And then in quotation marks, we are being polluted, poisoned, nuked, fleeced, gassed, double dealt, shortchanged, and sold out. We are being bullied, nagged, fleeced, a word I can't read. These are all handwritten in that elderly person scratch, kind of like mine's becoming. We are being bullied, nagged, fleeced, something, and robbed by the country club commandos and their unilateral bull BS. We are constantly bullied and nagged for more taxes. We are getting the American dream, Constitution, Bill of Rights, up the wazoo, with more debt, taxes and inflation. What percentage of people wake up? Why does it take so long? P.S. Thanks for fighting the good fight. The tax suckers are winning. It is a stacked deck, sting and highway robbery. P.S. Screw them all. Screw all the bullies, nags, and cons. 90%, and this is so frustrating to read because I don't believe this is true, 90% died in vain. That's one letter. Another one, Mike Brown. Screw all the bullying, nagging, rich tax suckers. Shoot them all down. Nuke them all. Pay cuts? Stick with the Constitution, Bill of Rights, and amendments. Where are the checks and balances? Hell no, I didn't forget. We are getting debt, taxes, and prices up the wazoo. Curse all of the, and again, a couple of words, something, holy rollers, and billions of hungry, starving people. It is ironic there are hundreds of millions for sports and taxes. The feces, obviously it's the S word, but the feces is increasing for those on minimum wage and in the service. The American dream is not for everybody or those who didn't wake up. It is a different ball game today. P.S. Screw them. Is that strong enough? Sincerely, a survivor. And then, in parentheses, over. And another page. In quotes, they still do a lot of feces to people and put them through it. Remember, and then in all caps the words freedom, equality, rights, liberty, and justice for all, question mark. Don't let them BS you. I remember delivering cigarettes, cigars, mints, gum, candy, etc. into the back doors of the country clubs. They don't show the American and Allied POW camps anymore. The Bataan Death March is also hush-hush. GIs are still scattered all over the world. More are being cremated. They make a big thing of digging GIs up and shipping them back. Walls and memorials have gotten big. Once was enough. P.S. Oh, I can't tell what it says. P.S. something, curse something. Sincerely, a lucky survivor. I don't know whether you can tell or not, but I find the letters depressing. You and I are constantly celebrating the greatest generation. And with the advent of the anniversary of D-Day this week, June 6, 1944, there will be a lot of pomp and circumstance. There will be a lot of speeches made. There will be a lot of things said. But I think one thing that we might want to think about is, and this is my guilt coming through, have we reached out to every potential World War II veteran that we know? There may be one still alive that is as bitter as this elderly gentleman is. I'd like to find him and take away a little of his bitterness, only by showing that there's somebody that has read his letters, that cares about him, that knows. Look, I know frustration, and I'm frustrated with the country, but I haven't seen the things that he's probably seen. So if this World War II vet is still alive, I make this promise to you. I'm going to try to track him down. I'm going to try to find, he obviously lives because the letters are handwritten, stamped, and postmarked Denver. Denver 802. It doesn't give the full 802 373. 802 373. I'll track down and see where it's from. But I just thought, I would take a few minutes and just read a couple of those letters, because I've been sitting here over the past couple of days digging through them, and I confess I feel guilty. I feel guilty because I hadn't read every single one when they came in, and I feel guilty because I haven't tracked him down. So I'm going to do that, and maybe I can find him before the next anniversary of D-Day. So moving on, the final report from Bob Mueller in a story that I read yesterday apparently contains an edited transcript from a voicemail that was left by a lawyer for President Trump to the lawyer for former National Security Advisor, Lieutenant General Michael Flynn. John Dowd, who was the attorney for Trump, left this voicemail for Rob Kellner, who was Flynn's attorney back in November of 2017. In Mueller's report, the voicemail is selectively edited in order to give the impression that Trump's attorney was asking Flynn's attorney for information that might hurt the president, while at the same time trying to remind Flynn's attorney about what Trump has said about Flynn. Here is the selectively edited voicemail. I understand your situation, but let me see if I can't state it in starker terms. It wouldn't surprise me if you've gone on to make a deal with the government. If there's information that implicates the president, then we've got a national security issue. So, we need some kind of heads up. Just for the sake of protecting all our interests, if we can remember what we've always said about the president and his feelings toward Flynn, and that still remains into the voicemail. Now, on the surface, that voicemail, as edited, makes it seem like the president's lawyer was trying to obstruct justice, or at the very least trying to hide something that might be damaging to the president. But the actual transcript of the voicemail has now been released, and it shows what Mueller left out. Let me read you the entire voicemail, unedited. Hey, Rob, this is John again. Maybe I'm sympathetic. I understand your situation, but let me see if I can't state it in starker terms. If you have, and it wouldn't surprise me if you've gone on to make a deal with and work with the government, I understand that you can't join the joint defense, so that's one thing. If, on the other hand, if there's information that implicates the president, then we've got a national security issue, or maybe a national security issue, I don't know, some issue that we've got to deal with, not only for the president, but for the country. So, we need some kind of heads up, just for the sake of protecting all our interests if we can, without you having to give up any confidential information. So, and if it's the former, then, remember what we've always said about the president and his feelings toward Flynn, and that still remains. But, well, in any event, let me know, and I appreciate your listening and taking the time. Thanks, pal. The Mueller report left out the part where the lawyer for the president specifically asked for information that was not confidential. Mueller's report, I think the longer we study this report, and the more that the Barr investigation continues to dig up additional emails, transcripts, the documents behind the Mueller report, the more we're going to find that Bob Mueller did a disservice to the country. The Mueller report specifically left out the part where Trump's lawyer very specifically asked for information that was not confidential. He was not asking for confidential information. Mueller's report strings along sections of the voicemail to give distinctly the other impression. So now this is the second example of selective editing in the Mueller report that we know about so far. It's important that context was left out of a text message exchange between former Trump attorney Michael Cohen and a Georgian-American businessman. The businessman, George Ritzhalsky, I can't pronounce his last name, sent a letter to Attorney General William Barr demanding that a footnote be retracted from the Mueller report because it was misrepresenting his conversation. Have you heard about that in the mainstream media? I didn't think so. I hadn't either. And I watch it for a living. Let's go to Los Angeles. Why do I want to go to Los Angeles? I don't want to physically go to Los Angeles. But I want to go to Los Angeles because what's happening in Los Angeles, I think, is going to be a great example of what's going to happen in the rest of the country the more Democrats take control of more major American cities. I think it's coming to Denver. You see, the rat population has exploded as a result of the accumulation of garbage, and a Los Angeles police officer has now shown symptoms of the flea-borne disease typhus, which is spread by rats. Here's the story coming to us from NBC4 in Los Angeles.
Huge rats crawling all over rotting garbage. It's a breeding ground for disease and fleas carrying typhus. Now, the rats are living in mountains of trash left uncollected for weeks, even months. The mayor has promised to clean it up. But I-Team investigator Joe Grover found the city continues to ignore the growing garbage heaps, and that puts all of us at risk.
I want to pause it for just a moment. And I want you to stop and think about, what would you do? Wherever you live, does it make any difference whether you live in a major metropolitan area or you live in a small rural area? It doesn't make any difference. What would you do if for months on end, garbage was allowed to just pile up? You see the garbage trucks. You see them going up and down the streets or the roads. But in certain areas of town, they just let the trash accumulate. I understand that NBC4 in Los Angeles is doing journalistic yeoman's work here by pointing out how incompetent city government is in allowing the trash to accumulate. But I have to ask myself, how do voters just let that happen? Where's the recourse? Where is the backlash? Does it actually, I mean, you have a cop that has already contracted typhus. And NBC4, the major NBC affiliate in Los Angeles, is now doing an expose on just how bad things are. Where's the Democrat mayor? Where's the Board of Supervisors?
You're getting a bird's eye view of LA's most notorious trash pile. It's in downtown on Ceres Avenue, right between the fashion and produce districts. Day and night, this spot and countless others are magnets for rats that could carry fleas infected with typhus and other diseases.
I am so scared.
Estella Lopez represents business owners who've complained to the city about the Ceres Avenue trash pile and others like it.
I can't walk down the street without thinking that a flea could jump on me.
This national survey now ranks LA as the second most rat-infested city in the nation. One reason experts say, heaps of uncollected trash at hundreds of homeless encampments, where people are literally living in piles of garbage, like outside this supermarket and inside that mountain of filth on Ceres Avenue.
This is a breeding ground for typhus.
I'm disgusted by it personally.
We first told Mayor Garcetti about that Ceres Avenue health hazard last October.
Our responsibility is to make sure the trash doesn't even accumulate in the first place. That shouldn't have happened, and we're going to make sure it doesn't.
So he's first told about it October of 2018. We're now in June of 2019. The trash is still there. Where's the accountability? Before I delve into just how bad this is, don't you think it makes us sound like a third world country? You have, and granted it's only one cop, but if there's typhus spreading among cops, imagine the kinds of diseases that are spreading among the homeless population. Imagine having your business down between the fashion district and the other parts of, if you've ever been to the south part of downtown Los Angeles, first I'll tell you this, there's some fantastic Mexican places to eat. But I've been in that area. In fact, one of my all-time favorite Mexican food joints, I shouldn't call it a joint because it's a white tablecloth Mexican place, is located in Skid Row. They've taken an abandoned warehouse and they've converted it into this incredible Mexican joint Several of you that are listening to this podcast have eaten there, and you know how great it is. But all around it are homeless population in tents. The trash is unbelievable, and you have to actually drive in and park inside a barbed wire area in order to be safe. That's America?
After that interview, the city did clear away the trash here. But month after month since then, we've been watching, and the filth has been piling up once again.
I want to report a huge trash pile at 800 Sarah Street.
And even a call to 311.
Hello, this is Mayor Eric Garcetti.
Couldn't get the city to act fast.
You're saying it could take up to 90 days to clean it up?
An inefficient system for collecting rotting garbage. And the I-Team has learned the city has no program to control the growing rat population that feasts on all that trash. Yep. Other big cities like New York and Washington have entire teams devoted to rat control. This D.C. crew is even experimenting with bait stations laced with a new rat contraceptive.
The traditional methods that we use does...
I'm sorry, I have to interrupt. For all of the wild-eyed feminists out there, this is called the female rat reproductive health care system. Yeah. Female rat reproductive health care system.
Work. So we need something else.
We have so many rats.
Pepe Garcia of LA's Sanitation Bureau.
Shouldn't the city be doing some kind of rodent control?
It's something that we'll look into.
But some say there's no time to waste, like UCLA infectious disease doctor Jeffrey Klausner, who says LA's trash and rat problem ranks right up there with the worst slums he's seen in the third world.
Trash and food waste attracts rats.
Klausner warns that rats spread not only typhus, but also dangerous strains of salmonella and even bubonic plague.
I am so worried.
Worried because rats carrying typhus-infected fleas were found around L.A. last fall, according to health department emails obtained by the I-Team. The I-Team has learned that fleas found on some animals at LA's North Central shelter tested positive for typhus. As the summer flea season looms and the garbage heaps grow, so does concern that an even bigger disease outbreak could hit LA in the months ahead.
This is serious. People get very violently sick. This is unacceptable.
We asked Mayor Garcetti to speak with us about that trash pile on Saris Avenue and about the growing epidemic threat. But he declined to sit down with us. His spokesman told us we could find him at a public event, and we plan to do just that.
Yeah, they're going to find him at a public event. What they need to do is they need to go to Saris Avenue, and they need to get a couple of rats. They need to kill the rats, put them in a shoebox, take it to a public event, open the shoebox in front of God and everybody at this event and say, hey, Mayor Garcetti, what are you going to do about the rats? We got cops that are contracting typhus. You've got an epidemiologist telling us that we need to worry about typhoid fever breaking out, the bubonic plague breaking out. And what are you doing? It's been October of 2018 since we brought this to your attention, and you haven't done squat. Now let me make this political. Democrats. When the epidemiologist says that this is worse or like what he has seen in some third world slums, this is America. This is the freaking United States of America. Again, we're about to celebrate the anniversary of D-Day. The liberation of Europe, the liberation of the world for that matter, from the scourge of the Imperial Japanese and of the Nazis. And now we're dying a slow death. We're dying a slow death because the more we depend upon government and the larger government grows, the more inefficient it becomes. I don't know where you're listening to this podcast. I know some people listen to it in Chicago. Some people listen to it in Dallas. Some people listen to it down in Houston. I don't know where it is that you're listening. In fact, I'd be curious sometime to know where you're listening. So shoot me an email or send me a text message or something. Send me a tweet to let me know where you listen. But I would encourage you, look around and look around at the Democrat-controlled cities in this country and tell me that they're not just a bunch of feces-ridden slums, and we're just shrugging our shoulders like, yeah, well, no, it doesn't have to be that way. Shame on us. And let's stick with Los Angeles for a minute, because voters who live within the boundaries of the Los Angeles Unified School District are going to the polls. Now, obviously, most of them are not going to vote, but there's a measure called Measure EE. It's a parcel tax designed to raise $500 million a year for the next 12 years by imposing a tax of 16 cents. That's $0.16, 16 cents per square foot on business and residential buildings. Here's what I find fascinating about the editorial, because it proves that people, including newspapers, are just economically illiterate. The editorial says, in part, commercial, industrial, and institutional landowners would pay the lion's share, which is a major reason various business organizations are vehemently against the measure. Landlords of apartment buildings also would be significant contributors and might pass that expense along to renters in non-rent controlled buildings. You know, this is truly Bernie Sanders' socialist communist level ignorance of how markets work. So that warehouse, that factory, or that hotel is going to completely swallow the parcel tax, and they're not going to pass it along through higher prices and higher rates, and landlords merely might pass the new tax along to renters? You know, I think even the most clueless Marxist would recognize that this parcel tax, doesn't make any difference how much it is going to be passed on to renters and to those who buy goods and services out of those buildings where those goods and services are provided or manufactured. Economics 101. You understand that. I understand that. How is it that the city of Los Angeles doesn't understand that? But the editorial writer continues. He actually has this magnanimous point. I say magnanimous with a certain irony. He writes, it's not hard to understand voter weariness over repeated demands for yet another tax to pay for problems that never seem to get solved, especially in the case of a school district that hasn't always been particularly well run. LA Unified has agreed to pension and health care obligations without budgeting for the cost. It's been embroiled in more than a few scandals, and declining enrollment means less revenue going forward. But hey, who cares? You know, the 60,000 employees of the LA Unified School District are not among the nation's highest paid, but most enjoy comprehensive medical benefits for themselves and their families without paying monthly premiums. Now, I want you to know, even if your workplace provides health insurance to you and to your family, to your dependents, you still have to pay a portion of that health care premium. I don't know of very few, if any businesses I know, say, here, we're going to cover all of your health insurance costs. That's what they do in Los Angeles. You know, asking 100,000 active and retired teachers and an equal number of dependents to chip in a minuscule $50 per month each for a health plan, which is a tiny amount roughly equivalent to what I paid in my first job probably 30, 40 years ago. Doing just that would save the school district $120 million per year, or approximately 10% of what is currently spent on health benefits. But do you think the union's going to agree that when they're getting something ostensibly for free, even though you and I know that nothing is for free, asking them to pay an additional $50 per month? Oh, that's outrageous. They're not going to do that. So I use these California examples just as a bellwether for what's coming to Colorado. And I know it's coming to Colorado because in my Twitter feed today, I ran across, I don't even know who this person is. The person that I'm referring to is somebody by the name of Sarah, spelled Saira, last name Rao, Rao. And her Twitter handle is at SAIRASAMEERARAO. Sorry about that. Sarah Samiro or something. In her profile, she calls herself a writer and a columnist for at Brown Girl Mag and author of upcoming Broken News, founder of In Together Media, and her preferred pronouns are she, her, and hers. And her location is Denver, Colorado. And I noticed, I don't know how she showed up in my feed today, but she tweeted out that, quote, "The American flag makes me sick." So the replies to that tweet were, as you can imagine, some pretty good trolling. Pictures of the American flag, suggestions that if the American flag makes her sick, would you please tell us what flag doesn't make you sick, and then why don't you move to that country? And I tweeted out in response to that particular tweet, I tweeted that in terms of if you hate the American flag, this is the new state of Colorado, and it makes me sick. Hashtag dumbassery. Well, I've noticed since yesterday when I retweeted her tweet that she's now locked down her account. I don't know who this woman is, but she's apparently, some people say that she is thinking about running for Congress. She's going to be a candidate in the 2nd Congressional District. I'm not sure what, but this is what is making me sick about Colorado. I really do have to admit. I've just really, in the last, well, I guess since the election, have just become sicker and sicker of what is happening to this state. Every time I turn around, Jared Polis, and I know Jared well, Jared is adopting, and the Colorado Democrats are adopting all of these far left policy agendas. They're making this hardcore turn to the left. And it's no longer the state that I've spent 30 plus years in. We're just becoming California. And so when I do stories about California, it's no different than when I do stories about what is happening in Europe. Because, just like Ebola or just like any other kind of virus that can, jump the Atlantic, the virus that has infected California can jump the continental divide. The virus that is infecting the East Coast, socialism, progressivism, is jumping the Mississippi River. It's coming at us from all directions. And so I use Los Angeles, I use California, I use New York and Chicago. I use the so-called socialist countries of the Nordic countries as examples of how it just doesn't work. And I hope it's some sort of, I don't know, just at least a little bit of a warning about what we're going to face if we don't buckle up somehow and either change the way we deal with politics, change the way that we message what we mean to be conservative, libertarian, what it means to live in individual liberty, unless and until we change how we do that messaging, I'm not sure that we can survive. I think Colorado will become California. And if Colorado becomes California, then New Mexico is next. And eventually they'll go after, they're going after Texas already. And if we lose Texas, and Texas turns blue, particularly with the national popular vote movement, we'll never elect another Republican president. Not in our lifetime. It'll be over. And everything that we've worried about in terms of finally going into the crapper will become true. And we'll have to claw our way out of it. It's not going to be pretty, and there's no guarantee that we will be able to claw our way out of it. So I bring you these stories not because I got an email from a friend the other day. You sounded so irritated. Well, I've been irritated all week because I've got this cold and I just don't feel good. So yeah, I'm in a foul mood. But I'm also in a foul mood because I'm reading all of this stuff and I just want to claw my eyes out. Now, Democrat Congressman Eric Swalwell, again from California, says he's coming to take all semi-automatic firearms from all law-abiding Americans. And somehow his mandatory buyback, and if you don't participate in the mandatory buyback, which I simply would not, he says that his buyback is investing in jobs and education. At a CNN town hall in Atlanta, this dumbass said this.
I'm the only candidate calling for a ban and buyback on every single assault weapon, but I also believe that's investing in jobs and education block by block.
If I can, because of course you mentioned your plan for a mandatory buyback of assault weapons of war, as you call them. You told my colleague Jake Tapper that you'd be willing to support criminal prosecution of people who don't follow if that requirement, if it were to become law. So under President Swalwell, you are saying that some Americans would indeed have to give up their guns.
Yeah, and I'm proposing something that Australia did, in the 90s.
And that hasn't stopped crime in Australia. It hasn't even stopped mass shootings in Australia. New Zealand. Do I need to remind you? That's probably offensive to New Zealanders and to Aussies to say, Australia, New Zealand, all the same thing. Down there, down under. This is now Eric Swalwell is polling at 0%. 0%. And I'm not even sure that he's gotten his 65,000 individual contributors that he needs to make the first Democrat presidential debate. In fact, parenthetically, I don't even think that John Hickenlooper, who is also polling at 0%, I don't think he's made that cutoff of 65,000 individual contributors. So these people are not going to be the nominee. But here's what these people are. These people are the new face of the Democrat Party. These people really are, they are now out in the open. They have come out of the closet, so to speak. They are now openly advocating the actual confiscation of guns, semi-automatic weapons, or in his case, he calls them assault weapons or weapons of war. As I've always said, all of my weapons are assault weapons. And in fact, the baseball bat that I keep upstairs is also an assault weapon. But do they truly believe? It's almost like I want them to start impeachment proceedings against Donald Trump because I believe that ensures the reelection of Donald Trump. I almost want them, I want Democrats in the House, I want them to pass a bill, even though it will fail in the Senate. I'd like to see them, instead of going to these debates and talking about gun confiscation, grow a spine, grow a pair. Why don't you actually, Eric Swalwell, instead of just talking about, hey, if I'm elected president, well, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to confiscate guns and I'm going to institute a mandatory buyback. I got a wild idea here. You're currently a sitting member of the United States Congress. Why don't you introduce that legislation? And in fact, I'll draft it up for you if you'll promise to introduce it. You see, they don't have the courage of their convictions. All they're doing right now is they're playing to their base because they know that if they were to actually introduce legislation to confiscate semi-automatic weapons or assault weapons or weapons of war or whatever the hell they want to call them, that might actually start a revolution. And if they were to actually pass that legislation, of course, right now it would never make it through the Senate. But if they were to pass that legislation in the House, I think that would also guarantee that we win back the House in November of 2020. Doesn't necessarily mean we would keep the Senate, but I think it would guarantee that we would win the House. But they don't have the conviction to do that. This is all beat my chest, thump my chest. Let's talk big. Let's play to the base. You know that base that you listened to yesterday that at the California Democrat Convention were booing Hickenlooper because he said we can't be the party of socialism? That was booing John Delaney because he said Medicare for all is not the way to go? They're just playing to their base. But let's call them out on it. Come on, guys. Step up to the plate. If you think that confiscating guns is the way to go, draft the bill. Put it in the hopper. Put it up for a vote. Let's see how that goes. You bunch of weasels. In what can only be described as good news for me, it looks like, even though summer's going to keep getting better and better, Dollar Tree, I got to find the nearest Dollar Tree to me. They've just announced it is planning on selling alcohol in 1,000 stores across the United States, which I didn't realize that. I mean, I couldn't tell you. I'm sorry, I haven't been in a. Oh, I take that back. There is a Family Dollar store, not, well, some distance from the undisclosed location, but I thought they sold alcohol. So I guess maybe I didn't pay any attention. The company plans to add adult beverages at stores and expand the coolers and freezers at approximately 400 Family Dollar stores. It was announced in the discount retail chain's first quarter fiscal 2019 report as part of an expansion plan connected to the acquisition of Family Dollar. USA Today Money tweeted out, Dollar Tree is adding alcohol to about 1,000 Family Dollar stores in its latest effort to turn around the struggling chain. Yes, alcohol. If you're struggling, if you have a retail outlet that's struggling, booze. The answer is booze. I actually think that selling alcohol at any location is a pretty good idea. Revenue's going to come in and out throughout the day. It's really convenient if you think about it, since there's literally a Family Dollar store, I think, in every city in the country. The question here, though, is will the alcohol be cheaper? And will it give you any sort of weird side effects because of the brands? Because I can only imagine the off brands of alcohol that they will have to sell. Will they sell it for $1? I mean, I know, like, you know, Trader Joe's has $2 Chuck. So will Family Dollar store have like $1 Chuck? Yeah. Hey, honey, could you stop at Family Dollar and get us some $1 Chuck? I'm having a really bad day, and I could use a bottle of $1 booze. We haven't done any climate news for a while, and there's a story that I found early this morning that points out that 10 of 10 coastal Antarctic stations show zero warming over the past decades. And actually, they've updated it since I first printed the story out, and there are now 11 Antarctic stations that show zero warming over the past decades. So over the past several years, climate alarmists have increasingly been resorting to weather ambulance chasing, and that's necessitated the trotting of the globe in the search of weather anomalies to behold as proof of man-made climate change. In other words, let's try to, if we can't prove it here, we can go to the far corners of the earth, and surely in the far corners of the earth, we can find these anomalies and use the anomalies of proof that either the climate is getting warmer, it's getting cooler, or as in the modern parlance, it just doesn't make any difference whether it's warmer or cooler. It's climate change, and we're all going to go to hell and have it if we don't change our ways immediately. But one place that they don't like to go to is Antarctica, because a number of studies have been showing the opposite of what was predicted earlier has actually not been happening at the South Pole, except for volcanic activity beneath parts of the Antarctic ice shelf itself. So they looked at 10 and now 11 Antarctic stations under operation in Antarctica, scattered along the Antarctic coastline and operated by different countries. So it's not some conspiracy that it's just all Americans or it's all Brits or it's all Aussies. 10 different stations operated by 10 different countries. And with the 2018 data in, now's a good time to look at the long-term temperature trends of those 10 stations. We do know that Antarctic sea ice excuse me, that Antarctic sea ice has seen an impressive upward trend over the past 40 years, and so tells us that cooling might be at play. So here are, let's see, there's Butler Island and Neumayer, Halley, Siowa and Casey, Davis, Zhongshan, Mernal, Dumont d'Urville, and Mawson, Novorossiysk something. All of those, none show warming. Not a single Antarctic coastal station shows warming, with most of them actually showing cooling. So now you know why the climate change ambulance chasers have been silent about this remote, vastly undisturbed continent. It's proving that, yeah. You know, at some point, I don't know when, but at some point, can't we just recognize that the climate has always changed, and it always will, and trying to implement public policy that will take us back to the Stone Age is precisely that. It's just about government control over our lives. It has nothing to, they don't care about the children. They don't care about you. They don't care about Africa. They don't care about anything other than power and control. And that's all this is about. I haven't gone to see Rocket Man yet, the biopic about Elton John. And I'm a big Elton John fan. But regardless of whether I'm a fan of Elton John or not, when movie stars and singers and performers of any sort, when they step into hypocrisy, I can't help but point it out. So at the end of a concert, which I think took place somewhere in the UK, but I'm not sure where, Elton John, and look, I've been to his Goodbye Yellow Brick Road farewell tour. I went to one of his concerts, Tamara and I did, in Denver. And at the end, I've now noticed a trend that at the end of each of these farewell tour concerts that he's doing, or actually I take it back, it was at a short intermission. He comes on stage and he talks about his career, and he talks about how fortunate and how lucky he's been, and he said some really nice things. And at the concert in Denver, there was nothing political, nothing whatsoever. He simply talked about love and how people need to be more caring of each other, and there were no political overtones to it whatsoever. But apparently, when he's in his home country of the United Kingdom, he preaches love, but hates imperialist English idiots.
If there is one thing that I learn as I get older, it's the incredible healing power of love and compassion. And I really believe that we need more love and compassion in the world today. A lot more. I am so sick to death of politicians, especially British politicians.
We need more love in the world. We need more love. But I hate these British politicians. I hate them.
I am sick to death of Brexit. I am a European. I am not a stupid colonial imperialist English idiot.
I'm not a stupid imperialist English idiot. Seriously. He says he's a European.
I'm ashamed of my country for what it has done. It's torn people apart. So I want more love in the world. I want us to talk to each other, to come together. And I want us to start right now.
And so he preaches love, then talks about how he hates these imperialist English idiots, talks about how he is a European, and then goes back and talks about how we need to love again. This whole idea of being a European really drives me crazy. That would be like me saying, living in the United States of America, I'm a North American. That's what I really am. dissing my own country. I think this is at the heart of the battle between ordinary Americans, ordinary Brits, ordinary Germans, ordinary French, ordinary, pick your country. Well, at least pick your industrialized Western civilization country. Versus the elites. Because the elites truly are globalists. And they truly do think in terms of not the United States of America, not with our own standards, our own morals, our own values. But they do think in these global terms, while the rest of us are proud of our country. We're proud of the country that we're born in. So when Elton John says that I am a proud European, that tells me that you've abandoned your country. You have laid down with the globalists like Angela Merkel, or for that matter, Theresa May, and all the dipwads at the European Union that are allowing all the migrants to come in, that are diluting French culture, German culture, Italian culture, whatever culture it may be. He's thrown his lot in with them. So if he wants to be a European, that's fine. But I'll never be a North American. I'll be a citizen of the United States. Let's talk about impeachment for a minute. The entire impeachment conversation is now moving on two tracks within Washington. One on the congressional investigation side, and another on the side of the administration where the Attorney General is pushing forward with his investigation into how all of this stuff began. Both sides are at odds with the central narrative of the leading candidate for the Democrat nomination, Joe Biden. His push for some sort of return to the middle or a return to normalcy will seem increasingly impossible in a context in which impeachment sneaks up on disaffected voters and major economic players as a reality, while Republicans who have lost faith with our system of law enforcement see all the more reason to believe in a conspiracy against the president. But on one side, there's a time crunch. That time crunch is the nominating process. You see, Democrats hope that Speaker Pelosi's continued resistance to impeachment will crack sometime this month, lest they run into the months in which voters are deciding the next Democrat nominee. The temperature is rising. The plot is thickening. Congressman Jared Huffman from California says, "It's hard for me to imagine Congress certainly leaving for the August recess without some closure on impeachment." The Democrats obviously are eager to launch impeachment proceedings against Trump for fear that they're going to run out of time to persuade Pelosi to change course before presidential politics consumes Washington. This is why you have to watch for cracks in watch for cracks in Nancy Pelosi's face, but the Botox will keep you from seeing that. Instead, I think what you have to watch for is this kind of dumbass reporting over at, for example, on MSNBC, where they're actually talking about, well, just take a listen for yourself.
Saturday Night Politics on MSNBC, Donnie Deutsch. So, Donnie, what do you make of this argument? This is the political argument versus the base argument, and you want the word impeachment out of the conversation. Explain that.
I want to rebrand the fight. You have to fight. The Democrats have to fight, to the Rev's point. But you don't want to fight that you're going to lose. You're going to lose an impeachment fight for two reasons. Because Donald Trump gets to say, they're coming to take me away, they're going to take your president, and it's not going to go anywhere in the Senate. So you do look like sore losers, and you're setting up a losing fight. Does that mean you fight, don't fight? No. You rebrand the fight. Step away from impeachment and change it to the Trump criminal investigations. Already brand him a criminal. You say Robert Mueller basically said he obstructed justice. We know that. That was a criminal activity. He just couldn't indict because of the guidelines. We know he's an unindicted co-conspirator with the Southern District. We know we're going to be looking at his taxes, his philanthropies. You, Nancy Pelosi, you, Jerry Nadler, you, Adam Schiff, you, Elijah Cummings, start and initiate the Trump criminal investigations. Impeachment may be part of it. Brand him a criminal already. You already had an AG that has gone on a branding exercise. The head of the judicial system went on a branding exercise successfully. The Congress needs to rebrand impeachment the Trump criminal investigations. Have him saying, I'm not a criminal. That is the simple winning fight. Rebrand it. Impeachment is not the right word for you.
Unfortunately, I think Donnie Deutsch is onto something. Now, his background is in marketing and advertising. So naturally, he would come up with what I think is actually a brilliant strategy for the Democrats. Stop talking about impeachment, because the Americans are not ready for the removal of the president, which is what impeachment proceedings are about. Instead, focus on doing your investigations and focus on you're doing criminal investigations. Now, Congress can't really do criminal investigations, but unfortunately, the American public will be too stupid to know the difference. And I'm afraid that Republicans will be too stupid to point out the difference. All the Democrats can do is exercise oversight. They can exercise oversight, and they can try to couch it in terms of we're looking into possible criminal activity on behalf of the president. That avoids the impeachment word. That avoids Americans thinking that you're actually trying to remove the president. And it puts it in the context that most Americans who aren't paying attention can understand. Oh, did this president commit a crime? And Deutsch was brilliant, too, when he said, make the president say, I am not a criminal. That's the kind of offensive that we need to watch out for. And that's the kind of offensive that if the Democrats actually paid attention to what Donnie Deutsch was saying, they would actually be thinking one step ahead. How do you avoid that? You avoid that by pointing out that Mueller found no criminal activity, let the Barr investigation run its course, and if the Barr investigation, in fact, I shouldn't say run its course, the Attorney General needs to step up that investigation and put it into high gear, because if it is determined that illegal activities were undertaken to start this investigation of the president, that's the perfect counterpoint. That's the point the Republicans can use to show that this impeachment talk, or if they rebrand it and they talk about criminal activity, that's the perfect counterpoint to show that all the Democrats are trying to do is undo the 2016 election. So watch that closely. I think it's a brilliant strategy on the part of the Democrats if they actually adopt it. It takes the impeachment word out of the vernacular, out of the discussion, refocuses on criminality as opposed to impeachment and removal. And Republicans have to be smart. The Attorney General has to move quickly. The Attorney General has to make certain that whatever investigation he conducts, that if indeed it shows malfeasance or actual criminality at the beginning of this investigation, get those documents declassified. Get those documents into the record, and let Republicans start pointing out that all Democrats are trying to do is undo a 2016 presidential election. That's a winning strategy. Hillary Clinton's back in the news. She gave a commencement address at Hunter College in New York City this past week. Apparently, students rolled their eyes during the address as the notoriously corrupt former presidential candidate and Secretary of State screeched sanctimoniously about an assault on the rule of law. Listen, now remember, listen first.
There may not be tanks in our streets, but make no mistake, we are witnessing an assault on the rule of law and the foundations of our democracy. Just today, before this graduation ceremony started, we heard from the special counsel, Robert Mueller, who said there were multiple systemic efforts to interfere in our election, and that allegation deserves the attention of every American. But what we've seen from the administration is the complete refusal to condemn a foreign power who attacked our democracy or to take even the most basic steps to protect our voting systems for the future. despite the fact that all of the professionals who study this say more attacks are coming.
She went on to say, when I think about the future, I think about what we do when people in positions of authority are not held accountable, when they defy requests from the Congress, when they spread misinformation online. That's deliciously ironic, considering that Hillary Clinton was not held accountable despite clearly violating the Espionage Act. You know, when congressional investigators tried to determine how much classified information she potentially exposed to hostile nations, what did she do? She destroyed subpoenaed evidence in an example of actual obstruction of justice that was, quite honestly, arrogant even by Clinton standards. And then her campaign flooded the internet and the rest of the media with misinformation by commissioning that notorious Steele dossier. You know, all these students must have known this, because instead of rolling their eyes, they would have actually been hurling rotten tomatoes at her. I actually find it incredulous that she has gone unpunished for deeds that were clearly a violation of the rules of the National Archives, that were a violation of the Espionage Act, that violated all the rules and statutes related to classified information, and she still walks without any accountability whatsoever. Listening to Hillary Clinton give a commencement speech, I'd rather stab my eyes with a poker, or maybe I should say stab my ears with a poker. And last, thanks for listening to this episode of the Michael Brown Unplugged podcast. As usual, please go to my website, michaelbrowntoday.com, where you'll find you can listen to the podcast on the website. You can also download it at iTunes. If you download it from iTunes, it would be great if you could leave a 5-star rating and write a quick review, because that's always helpful in getting the podcast distributed to a much larger audience. But if you go to michaelbrowntoday.com, you'll see all the social media icons across the homepage, and you can join those, and you can follow on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, wherever I happen to be. All you have to do is go to michaelbrowntoday.com. Again, thanks for listening, and I'll talk to you again tomorrow.